As I silently listen to the Spirit within me and I think of its perfection, I know that I'm being born again, born into joy and hope and gladness, born into love and faith and assurance. Silently, I release every negative thought from my mind. I lose it, I let it go. I am one with the Creator, and the Creator is one with me. Because I am one with God, I am one with all people. Because I am one with life, I am one with everything that lives. I feel my union with people and with nature. I feel that I belong to life. I love life and I enter into the joy of living. I enter into companionship with others, into cooperation with them. And I know that something within me reaches out and embraces the whole world. Something within me blesses everything it touches, brings life and happiness and joy to everyone. Something in me acts as a healing balm, restoring everything to its natural and native perfection. As I silently listen to the Spirit within me and think of its perfection, I know that I'm being born again, born into joy and hope and gladness, born into love and faith and assurance. Silently, I release every negative thought from my mind. I lose it. I let it go. And I know that I am one with the Creator, and the Creator is one with me. Let's take a deep breath in And as we exhale, let's set our intention for this evening, that our minds are open and receptive, that we're preparing ourselves mentally to evolve, expand, and show God a good time tonight by means of each and every one of you. Take one more deep breath in. Slowly open your eyes. Stand up, take a stretch if you need that. All right. How are we doing? We good? It's going to cool down here in a minute, I promise. All right. So, hang on, let me get rid of the music. My live streamers are going, turn this thing off. Okay. So, let's review. Today we're going to start the third step, but we've already talked about being impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally, and this week was do not make any assumptions. Based on what you've done the last few weeks of class, what are you aware of? What new things have come to pass? What new ideas have you become clued into? How has your life changed in the past few weeks? William, come on. By the way, we have a lot of live streamers tonight, so stick with us, live streamers. We got a lot of people missing class tonight, so thank you for tuning in. Go, William.
Well, one thing, I knew that I found out I was taking a lot personally.
Uh-huh.
And now that I can see that I can do things and not take things personally, but I have a choice.
Right.
My choice is don't accept it.
Right. Yeah. Not taking things personally is really important. We take so many things to heart that aren't ours to hold. Think about that. Many people say things that for them it's just off the cuff, but to us, sometimes it really hurts us, and we take it personally. So absolutely, we have a choice in that moment to either internalize it and make it part of our fabric, or we can go, you know what, that's them, not me, right? All right, anybody else? Come on. There we go, Judy.
One of the things I noticed this last week was as I was paying attention to assumptions and thinking I really don't assume that much, I was surprised at how much I assume. Once I started really focusing on my thinking, paying attention,
Absolutely.
and I was a little chagrined by all
Right.
the assumptions I
Oh, no,
do
it's
make.
really overwhelming. When you realize how many things we assume, behavior, people, situations, world events, we're always aligning ourselves with some sort of assumption. We're going to talk about that tonight and how we come to that. Anybody else? All right, roll with it, and then hand it back to Becky for me.
Okay, for me, the biggest thing has been.
Put it in close.
Okay, for me, the biggest thing has been just been, like, be impeccable with your word insofar as, like, just not telling myself those, whatever it
Oh,
is.
absolutely.
Just being honest. And then also, like, affirming, that God's in charge, there's one power, and that's what it is, and all's good,
And you're working it.
And,
Absolutely.
it's been amazing, kind of, so.
Yeah, being impeccable with your word, it's really challenging. I have found myself, every time I teach this course, I take it with you. So I have found myself actually looking and saying, before I commit to something, am I going to be able to keep that commitment? Am I going to be in integrity with what I'm about to say? Am I authentically joining in the conversation and saying, okay, I can commit to this and be fully present and actually do what I'm committing to? Many times people will say to me, can you come over Friday night? And you're like, I'll try, knowing full well that I have no intentions when I say the word I try. Basically, that means no. So I'm actually being really honest about it and saying, you know what, I've already got plans, but thank you for asking me. I'm not leading people on to believe anything. I'm having integrity with my word. I'm being impeccable with my word. Yes?
When I was younger, I thought back about how I would lay in bed and worry about my aunt. She got me really upset about something. I don't even remember what it was, but I worried all night about it. And I didn't have the courage to confront her about it to find out if the way I was feeling was the truth or not. And now I can say I'm sure I was just assuming. I don't believe it was true, but
Yeah. You know what? It's really interesting when we do that. We stay up all night long worrying about things, and those people are sound asleep.
right.
They're not thinking twice about what happened, right? We're all bunched up. We're like, oh my gosh, my stomach hurts, my head is pounding, I'm sweating in the bed. And they're like, they could care less. They could care less. David.
It was kind of on the same line as that. What I've done is start asking more questions, and it's been really illuminating. It wasn't a habit I had before. I really just thought it looked pretty obvious what was going on, but it's been surprising.
Yeah, you made an assumption that it was really obvious. So
Yes.
when we make assumptions, we stop asking questions. When we stop asking questions, we're really basing everything based on past history and experiences. We're not allowing the new thing to come to the forefront. So speaking of the new thing coming to the forefront, there was something going on behind me while we were here, right? While we were doing this exercise. What do you think that just happened in front of us here? Anybody want to venture a guess? You guys are really quiet tonight. Wake up, come on. Anybody venture? What do you think was just created? What do you think was going on? Go ahead.
Like a shrine. It looks like the nail salon with the Buddha.
It looks like we're at the nail salon with a Buddha. I love it. Not the Buddha's temple, I'm at the nail salon. I love that. That's good. That's good. I like that. I'm at the nail salon with the Buddha's temple.
Well, it seemed to me like they were creating a sacred space and holding some intentions either for them or us or all of us together.
Okay. Anybody else? Seth?
I was going to say
Same thing? Okay. Anybody else? Come on. What did you think was happening? Go ahead, Scott.
some type of spiritual connection to Ganesha.
Okay? Yeah, because Ganesh is in the middle of it, right? So I had to tell you, here was my instructions to the staff. I randomly picked this stuff out from the back room. And I said, I want you to go out and place it, just kind of strategically place things by one another. It actually has no meaning whatsoever. We draw assumptions based on behavior. We draw assumptions based on the things that we see, which could all be very accurate. But really, it's just about making stuff up. And in the absence of knowing what's going on in the world, in our own world, we will make stuff up to try to fill the void of the question mark. Like if you didn't know, you're like, well, okay. And it's very legitimate. There's Ganesh up there. There's the Buddhist temple idea. There's earth. There's wind. There's not wind, but there's fire. There's all the elements there. I mean, you could actually draw all sorts of assumptions, but the whole instruction to my staff was just put this stuff up there and walk away. They were reverent about it. Yeah, they were intentional. So you even read into their behavior when I said, just kind of be still and do this. People do, think about it, that draws an assumption. People could go like this, hey, screw you, namaste. You know what I mean? You really don't know what's going on in their head. So we draw assumptions, and basically they call it making stuff up, right? People make stuff, or a different word for stuff. They make stuff up. And in the absence of meaning, the mind has to draw some sort of conclusion. In the absence of clear communication and direction, we start drawing conclusions. And when we do that, we start making up a story. And once you start making up a story, the second you start to believe it. And then it becomes ingrained in what you think is happening. And then even if someone were to say to you, no, that's not what's going on, now they have to disprove the thing that you were making up. Think about it. How many times have you had an assumption about someone, you made up a story, and they came back to you and said, that wasn't it at all, but you're like, oh, please, I know exactly what you were doing. Does that sound familiar? Right? So when we talk about making stuff up, if you were to look in your workbook on page 34, I'll read it for you guys, all right? On page 34, we're going to take a big leap into what could be a murky, muddy, swampy place and define truth. Notice truth is a small t, okay? For the purpose of our work together, truth is what you believe in. Obviously, this isn't divine truth, capital T, or God's truth, capital, or even T is truth as we look at it. So how do we come to this definition? You could never believe something if you didn't think it was true. We will have a chance to look at how we come to these truths in week 5 of this class, but for right now, let's just assume that if we think something's true, we believe it, and we believe it because we think it's true. If we're honest with ourselves, we can see that these truths don't necessarily or automatically reflect objective reality. But we act as if our truth is objective reality. Many people have gone to war defending and protecting their truth. We see that in the news all the time. People have a tendency to think, talk, and act in absolutes. For example, we believe in God or we don't. We believe in a right for a woman to choose or we don't. However, unless we are committed to spiritual practice of some sort or just willing to examine our life, we rarely examine the beliefs we have and why we would hold them as being true. Someone great once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Do you like that? Yeah, Cheryl, hang on. What's that? Socrates said that. So, when you're making stuff up, and sometimes we don't even know we're doing it. We make assumptions. When we listen to the news, when we hear about something happening in a country far away, we start drawing conclusions. And really, what are we drawing our conclusions from? Our own self, your own self, and your what? Your finite experience. What you were born to think and when you were raised, what people said about other people and about other cultures, about other religions, about other people. All that stuff is programmed into who you are. And so we have to be really careful when we're drawing up those assumptions and making stuff up. If you have a need to make something up, I want you to be able to turn to your workbook. If you're starting to create a storyline for yourself or for someone else, I want you to read, we're going to read what's up here. Dr. Holmes wrote this. "I have a faith, a conviction, an assurance that cannot be moved, for I am established in a love which envelops everything I contact and every person I meet. I have a friend, capital F, who knows all my needs. I accept the kingdom which God has implanted in me, and this life reaches out to everything around me in joy and in gladness, and with the blessed assurance that all is well. And believing that God is love, I affirm that there is nothing in me that could hurt or harm or hinder those around me from entering into full expression of their own joy, into the completeness of their own self-expression, and to the perfection of their own being." So what this is referencing is when you read something like this, before you start drawing conclusions and making up a story about someone else, this establishes the consciousness for you to keep an open mind and say, whatever that is, it is, and you don't even have to label it. The problem is the second we start to label something, it's based on what John said. It's based on a series of assumptions and past and history that we've already had. It's not allowing for anything new to happen, right? When you make those assumptions, when you start drawing conclusions, you're basing everything on a history and not basing it on its current situation or in this moment. And I would say to you, I'm not the same person I was a year ago. But sometimes when I say something, my husband will say to me, "Oh, okay, there he goes again." And he responds and he goes off on his tangent, thinking that I'm in the same scenario. I'm like, but no, that's not what I was thinking. But because it's happened before, he assumes it's happening again, and the gauntlet comes down, and next thing you know, we're having a discussion. Closing the windows so the neighbors don't hear our discussion, right? So when we do this, we start treating people as if they aren't capable of changing or evolving, we're part of the problem. Does that make sense? So, making stuff up. What is the truth and who defines it? We talked about that. It's you. Navigating this world. I love this, right? Mental road maps. Another way to look at this idea of truth is to use the word paradigm. Paradigm comes from the idea of a pattern or a territory with boundaries. A territory with boundaries is often called a map. We each have our own paradigms or maps which we use to determine how to function in the world. They are a pattern to see what's right, wrong, and what falls within our areas of belief. In fact, map might be an even better word than paradigm because a map is something you use to get around. We can function more easily in the world if we have a map to guide us. What we need to do is to explore our map, look at how we set up our boundaries, and determine if we would like to expand or re-examine our boundaries or truths. And I just realized that I forgot to hand out the PowerPoints. So we're going to take 2 seconds and hand these out because now you don't have to try to scramble and write everything down that I just said, right? Here you go, Cheryl. Thank you. All right. That would be great. There you go. Take one for yourself first. Yep. Sorry about that, folks. I forgot to hand them out. You already had yours. See, you were one step ahead tonight. I know. I try not to do that because then people look ahead. They try to spoil the surprise factor of it all, right? All right. There it is. So let's talk about maps. What do maps have? Maps have, anybody, tell me what a map contains. Lines. Anybody ever say, cross over this line and no. Did anybody ever threaten anybody with the line? Don't cross, you're crossing the line. Better yet, you're approaching the line, right? What else are on maps? Directions. Anybody, you know that on a map, have you ever seen those big cities that have the freeway that goes around the city? Yeah, anybody? Right? You know, it's usually like a 475 or a 275. It's usually, I don't know why it's a something 75. It seems to be that right number, whatever. But anyway, have you ever repeated the same cycle over and over again like you've never gotten off that freeway? Have you ever been afraid of exiting the freeway and trying something new and going to a new destination? So think about on the map, sometimes we just keep repeating the same thing. We go round and round and round in our life, and we're afraid to take an exit or what I would call a new entrance into some new experience because it feels uncomfortable. So on a map, you have lines, we have borders, we have topography. Sometimes it shows you that, okay, this one's going to be really hard to drive over because it's a mountain range, right? And so in our own paradigms, we say there are certain things that I can walk up to and have no problem with. There are certain things, nope, I'm not even going to try it because it's just going to be too hard. But a lot of this stuff is just a belief system. So think about how your maps help you get around. So think about how you place yourself on your map and what if the map is faulty? Does anyone have a GPS? Right? Have you ever had your GPS lead you into some unknown territory? Yeah. When I would work in Northern California, I would use my GPS to get me around, and I'm supposed to be going to some high school, and I end up in some port, in a dead end, right in front of the water. I'm like, this can't be right, right? I live in a neighborhood that's new. My neighborhood isn't even on the GPS. I don't even exist yet in the map form, right? What happens if your map is faulty? What if you were brought up to believe certain things that aren't necessarily true about you anymore? Anybody see the movie Sordid Wedding? No? Anybody see yeah, you saw Sordid Lives? Did you see Sordid Wedding? The sequel? You have to see. You saw the sequel. Good, because I was in it. Did you recognize me in that? Yeah, pretty scary, isn't it? Okay. So in Sordid Wedding, there's this line that Carolyn Ray says to someone else. She said, to her mother, actually, she said, you may have installed my buttons, right? You may have installed them, but I'm not going to let you work them, right? I'm not going to let you flip them on. So some of us have had buttons installed for years. We've had faulty maps for years, and people trigger all sorts of things from that. And you, like William was saying, what he's decided is in this class, part of this evolution process was, I get to make a choice as to whether or not you're going to trigger my buttons. You know, my mother may have helped me install them, but she doesn't get to turn them on or off. I get to do that. And the same thing happens in relationships. It happens in your health conditions. It happens in financial things. Certain triggers, certain buttons are there, and you get to determine when they're turned on or when they're turned off and how you're going to respond to them. But what if your map is faulty? And you can tell if your map is faulty if you keep repeating the same thing over and over again. If you're saying to yourself repeatedly, oh my God, this again, guess what? You got to change roads because you're on the wrong path. Doesn't mean you have to abandon anything. It just means this path isn't the one that's working. We have to try. Remember last week we said we need to find the other right answer. It doesn't have to be that someone's right and someone's wrong. It means we need to find the right answer, the new right answer. Does that make sense? Okay? All right. So, moving right along. This process, I love this. This is one of my favorite slides of the whole curriculum. This is called the ladder of inference. This breaks down how we actually make decisions and how we become aware of our maps or our belief system. So we're going to take you through a journey. On the left side, we're going to talk about the actual process. So just follow it in your PowerPoint. The first thing we do is we observe something. Like you guys observed, Cheryl and William and them coming out and doing what they did with that. There was an observation made with that, wasn't there? Right? And then from that, so first of all, you looked at the data. You looked at the experiences and you kind of recorded in your mind what they were doing. And then once you do that, once you observe, you move to just select, right? The next part is, I select the data from what's observed. It's like, okay, I'm observing them doing this, and, it kind of looks like, there's something happening up here. I don't know how to define it, but there's something going on. So I'm looking at the different elements that exist in the observation. Does that make sense? I'm gathering my data about what I'm observing. Then I add meaning to it. And when we add meaning, it's the nail salon Buddha, right? It's the Buddha nail salon. We add meanings, and some of them are cultural and some are personal. But now you've added meaning to it. And now how did you come up with that meaning? You came up with the meaning based on your past experiences, right? It has nothing to do with its current moment because you really don't know what they were doing. But based on what you saw, based on your past experiences, you drew an assumption that this is what's happening. Are you following me? All right. Then, exactly, we make assumptions. Once you add meaning to it, you're now making assumptions based on what you just defined it to be. Are you good? Following it? Once that happens, we start drawing conclusions. Once I've made assumptions about, then I know what you're up to. Once I've gone through this process, I know what you're up to. And I'm drawing conclusions based on that knowing. Any sound familiar, anybody? Because I see you hitting your spouse. Okay. Then you adopt beliefs about the world around it. So now you're like, see, you've always been that way. Anybody? My boss has always said that kind of stuff to me, or I've always been in this situation. This has always surfaced. Because guess what? It's all based on the map that you've been following, right? And then finally, you act on it. You take an action based on that. So the first thing we do is we observe something. We then have to select and we select certain things. I mean, how many things do you think pass by you that you don't even see? Thousands every day. If you have 50,000 thoughts a day, that's what they say. 50,000, can you imagine having 50,000? I don't remember what I had for lunch. And now you're telling me I had 50,000 thoughts in a day? That's amazing, isn't it? Hard to believe. So I'm going to give you an example that happens to ministers a lot. And this one happens to, it talks about Edward, but it actually happens to me. Same thing has happened to me. So I'm going to give you an example of how people draw conclusions, right? So the first one is this, observed. Edward said hello in the social hall, and he only took 2 seconds. So you know how when I say goodbye to people when they walk out on Sundays? It's a very quick process, and it's just, you've got 500 people walking out the door in a matter of seconds, right? So I don't have time to engage in everybody and everything, right? So the first one is that Edward was observed just saying hello, and he just took 2 seconds and he moved on. So to this person, he didn't make eye contact with them. He's like, well, Edward didn't make eye contact with me. He gave me 2 seconds and he didn't give me, well, same thing happens to me. People are like, well, Joe didn't even look in my eyes when he said hello or goodbye. He just, kept moving, right? So then they added meeting. Uh-oh, Edward doesn't like me. Joe doesn't like me. He didn't look at me in the eye. He doesn't like me. I wonder what I did to upset him, right? Look how they're drawing conclusions. Just because I had 2 seconds to say goodbye, people are already going, now someone doesn't like me based on a 2-second interval, right? And then the next one, they assume now that Joe isn't very warm, right? He can't be warm. Look at him. He just blew me off. He took 2 seconds. He didn't look at me in the eye. He doesn't like me. I just think he's cold and callous. You think this is a joke. This stuff happens, right? Then you made a conclusion. I really don't even know who he is. He says one thing up here on Sunday, and then at the door he ignored me. I mean, what the hell is that? Right? They start drawing conclusions from it. Then they move into a belief system. All ministers are phony. See, ministers, they're all the same. It's just, it's what he does. He just does that, and off he goes home, and ministers are phony. And then the final one, they act on it, and they're like, I have to go find another place to go to church. When I move, okay, you know how I am about rote prayer. I'm not a big rote prayer fan. Don't give me the same prayer over and over again. That's why you write prayers every week that are fresh and new, because God's fresh and new. So if you're doing Hail Mary, full of grace, or the Our Father, whatever it is, so during the service, I took out the Lord's Prayer. Oy. Everybody was running out the door. People were quitting right and left. That's blasphemous. How dare you do that? How dare you take that prayer out? I'm like, it's a rote prayer. If I say the Lord's Prayer, many times people who are of different faith traditions are like, what the hell is that? Right? And other people, they immediately travel back to Catholic school where this nun is hovering over them with a ruler. It's like, how could you bring that prayer into a place like this and not have reactions from people who had a negative experience with that? So that caused all kinds of uproar. People left the church. When I removed the peace song, people left the church. I'm like, there's more than one song that can encapsulate our entire teaching. Can we at least be open to there's a different way of doing things? Whenever I switch up meditation, people get all bunched up and they get all upset and they draw conclusions from it. So you have to be really careful, because what you believe is a process of how you're selecting that data and how you're perceiving it based on your past experiences. You're not giving it anything new. You're just repeating the same old thing. Does that make sense? I mean, talk about making assumptions. This is what we do. This is like Judy was saying, it's really challenging when you start testing yourself to see where you're making assumptions about your behavior or someone else's behavior or anything that's going on around you. And we don't understand that our entire world is based on assumptions. Right now, I assume that if I were to drop this, if I were to let go of this remote, I'm assuming it's going to go down. There's an assumption based on my knowledge of gravity, right? What would happen if I let go and it went up? What would happen to my idea of science and gravity? Everything would be tested, right? Well, not everything is as simple as gravity, but think about how complex your life is and how different emotions you have in your body and in your mind and your experiences. Think about how those have changed over the years, and yet there are still people making assumptions about your behavior based on something you did years ago. I'm really honest. I tell the story all the time. I said something 10 years ago about a certain kind of food that I don't like, and that I didn't like 10 years ago, right? Well, since then, it's been reintroduced in a way that I like it. So when we go out and I order it off the menu, the first thing Trey would say is, well, but wait a minute, you've said you always hated that. Why would you order that? You said you hated it. I'm like, well, I used to. Well, no, you've said 10 years ago. I remember we were sitting at this restaurant. You told me that, I'm like, okay, we've been together almost 30 years. Really? You expect me to be the same person I was? I'm not the same person I was yesterday. So don't hold me to something that I said 10 years ago about a like or a dislike or a pattern. Evolve, change, move, right? So we have to make these kind of adjustments with one another. We have to allow ourselves space for people to grow and to expand and change their minds and give them, like we said yesterday, or last week, to make a mistake and be okay with a person making a mistake. Instead of crucifying them for making a mistake and getting down on them, we're like the evolved person, right? The evolved person, the enlightened person allows for people to make mistakes. And it's part of the living process that we do this. The person who's not evolved doesn't allow for any mistakes. So we have to allow for changes and allow for mistakes. We have to allow for the next answer, right answer to surface, and not necessarily the one that we think is true based on our finite experience. Are you following me? Are we good? You guys are really quiet. Are you just stunned? Is that it? You're just stunned with all of this awareness now? You're like, oh crap, now I got to put this into play too, right? I mean, now I got to really test all of this stuff? Yeah. Good luck with that. After reviewing the ladder, consider a situation to reach the time in which you climbed up the ladder, selecting data, placing meaning on the event, and developing attitudes and points of views based on your assumption. In other words, have you ever jumped the ladder of inference? Have you ever jumped to that place? Anybody want to share a short example of how you jumped to a conclusion based on what you thought was true, but it really wasn't true? And crickets fall over the room. Okay.
I made some assumptions about some actions of a good friend of mine, and and it's during the course of this class, right? So I'm like, wait a minute, I'm really taking that personally. Is that really what was going on? Was that really directed at me personally, or were there other things at work? And I was really hurt by the actions that were going on. And then I was like, well, I need to test my assumption here. So I sent a text and I said, can we get together and talk about a couple things, or are we too broken to do that? And she responded back and said, sure, let's get together. And we met this afternoon and had a great talk, and all my assumptions were wrong, and we're good. But otherwise, I would have let it fester, because it was, the little monkey mind was going, and I would have just driven myself crazy about it. So I took the action and tested the assumption, and I was totally wrong.
So, in our communication guidelines we talk about, it talks about if I'm not sure about something, I'll ask, and I want you to do the same. Our communication guidelines that we talked about at the very beginning of the course, and how we implement all of the classes. Think about that. How can we go through life just listening to people and processing it with our experience and think that they've had the same thing and that they too are saying what we think they're saying, especially in the world of the worst possible communication methods we have now, which are texting and email, right? Phone was one thing. I mean, think about it. When you went to the phone, you lost that eye contact with people. Now, you're reading a text or an email, given your current emotional state. Think about how many things you read between those lines. And I see people, and I will admit, I have done this. I will read a text, and I'll be kind of I'll be hangry, which is hungry and angry at the same time, all right? And I'm like a little bit edgy, and I'll get a text from somebody, I'm like, you know? I mean, Trey would laugh at me because I would be, when I had my other job, he said, you'd be sitting at the computer, be reading something, and you're like, right? And you just off you go. Worst form of communication ever. Because, and the problem is, and here's the problem, like my daughter, she's 20 years old. This is all she's ever known. And you think, oh my God. No wonder your generation has such a challenge in articulating their feelings and emotions, because you guys have done everything with like one, not even one word, one letter answers. You know, and you're like, and we're following the same format. You know, finally, I have this whole policy now. If we're texting back and forth and I feel my blood pressure going up, it's a phone call. I'm like, done texting, call me, right? And that's not a threat. It's like, I'm done texting. I don't love you any less, but I love you. Done texting. You know, not doing it. And an email the same way. I have a policy about emails. If you can't say it in 3 sentences, pick up the phone. These people who send these, 45-page emails that they have spent 2 days editing, and you read it, and you're like, what the hell is this? Who came up? What? This isn't even true, right? And then now, because the whole story has been printed in their mind, you have to go through and disprove every paragraph, where you could have had a conversation and avoided all of it. So one of the big problems we have is this thing and the computer. These things were supposed to make our life easier. Remember when they came out with that? And they said, this is going to make your life easier. I don't know if that's true or not. It's made certain elements easier, but I think it's made life a lot more complicated. You can't just, disappear, Then they offer texting in flight. That was the worst thing that Alaska Airlines ever did. Trey came home one day and said, guess what? I can text you during flight. I said, hell no, you can't. No, that was the time I finally found myself free of this thing. Worst form. Worst way to climb up the ladder is to use this tool. Anybody else have a situation like that you want to share?
I had a friend of mine who years ago I assumed was a bad actor. He was a bad actor. A year or so ago, I ran into him. Hadn't seen him for 10 years. I still assumed that he was a bad actor. And he turned out he was a minister.
And that's pointed to me because I'm going to try not to take it personally, William. I'm really trying.
No, but
I'm exercising the agreement right now. Go ahead.
But it was true, and that was something real bad where you said you assume something that he's going to always be the same way that he was years ago.
Well, you know what? I don't know if I told you, maybe I told you in Beyond Limits, that my speech teacher told me, I did my project with a woman who subsequently is an actress, right? My speech teacher told both of us after we did our performance in 11th grade, don't ever do public speaking because you'll never make it. That's actually her criticism. She said, don't ever plan on speaking in public, either one of you. And I'm like, so I sent her my DVDs about 5 years ago because I was working on forgiveness. And I'm like, I forgive you for saying that, And she wrote me back. She's like, I'm so sorry. I should have never said that. I can't believe as a teacher I would say that. It would limit your capacity. I'm like, yeah, no, I got that. And I didn't believe you. But thank God I don't believe half the things people say about me. And you too. Actually, more than half. Good thing I don't believe anything anybody says about me, right? Or very few people, because it doesn't really matter what they think, because it's all based on their assumptions. Does that make sense? All right, we're getting close to break.
But what about when other people make assumptions about you and that you're sitting there and you've said something and totally in a totally different context, but then all of a sudden they've made an assumption and it just escalates out of control. And
Well, and I call that's when you have to call that out in a gentle and loving way. And when I say gentle and loving, it's not like, oh my God, and start screaming at them. You have to say, you know what? No, it's just not true. That's not true. Let me tell you what my truth is. And however you want to, whatever you want to believe, I'm going to leave it up to you. But I'm just going to speak my truth. And if I'm impeccable with my word, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, then I can tell somebody, look, this is the way it is. And if they want to believe me, fine. If not, they're going to just have their assumptions anyway, and I don't want to dance with their dance anyway. I mean, even with family, I've had to stop dancing with certain family members because their assumptions were just over the top. And I'm like, I can't even have a conversation where you don't see me in a certain way. So, okay, then we just won't have those conversations anymore. And I have to be okay with that. And even if they're not, I have to be okay with it. So what people think about me is really none of my business. And so I don't really care too much when they say something out of context because I'm like, they don't know they don't know who I am. They don't know who I am. And then I have to ask myself, do I really need to tell them who I am? You know, I believe that when people show you who they are, you need to believe them. If someone shows you who they are, believe them. Right? So if someone treats you like that, then you have to really go, okay, do I want to continue to engage in that conversation? If somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Does that make sense? All right. It's time for the break. We're going to do break a little bit early today because we're going to go through the third agreement right after the break and then before we do group. So it's any questions about this chart? Isn't it a great chart? I love it. Hold on, make sure I got everything on there. Yeah. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the third agreement after our break, and then we'll do our small group. So let's take about oh, you know what? I wonder if the break is ready. Hold on. Thank you very much. See, I was making an assumption that they weren't ready. Gosh, I hate that. All right, let's take 15 minutes. We'll be back at 7:10, okay? made the food. Good job. Yes, thank you. Thank you, guys. Beautiful. Well, you didn't make the fruit, but you made a good pasta with meatballs. I'll tell you, that was good. All right. Everybody back in? Frank, are you the last one? All right. Look at it. Look at him. One more taste. One more taste. Can I share your story? Frank wasn't really paying attention to what was going on up here until the very end. He saw candles. He's looking around and going, okay, it's somebody's birthday. We're going to end up singing happy birthday. Whose birthday is it? He's like, good assumption. That was good, though. I love it. All right, so let's talk about the third agreement. When we talk about the third agreement, it's really not, we talk about don't make assumptions, but what we're really asking ourselves is this, to examine your thinking. I mean, it's actually to look at how am I coming to these conclusions that I've come to. I mean, it takes a lot of work the examined life takes a lot of work because you are constantly putting things through a filter of, hey, wait a minute, is this the truth? How do I feel about this? So when we say don't make assumptions, it's just saying, look, really take a look at what you're thinking and how you came to this conclusion. All right? We have a tendency to make assumptions. The problem is believing the unexamined thought. When we spend our life on autopilot, we really do. We spend our life just doing things and responding to things, and really, we don't spend the time processing things. Have you noticed any difference in the way your listening skills have changed since you started taking this class? How you actually are, really, I'm making a real attempt to let people get to the end of their sentence before I even take the gap in responding. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that there's something within you that says, wait, the difference is, what I have found is this, I'm making more eye contact while people are talking. If I find myself looking away, I'm suffering from what they call weapons of mass distraction. Right? Ying of a cell phone, or the noise of a TV in the background, or even music. I'm making an effort. When someone calls me, and if I'm at home and I've got music going on, I say, Alexa, cancel. Stop playing the music. Because I want to focus on what someone's saying and not having anything else going on in the background. If I'm going to do that, I can't. It used to be that we used to put on a resume that multitasking was good, right? I'm able to multitask. Well, what I find when I'm multitasking is I'm not doing anything 100%. Again, multitasking is, I get it, but really, is that really a good thing if you can't really focus on one thing and get it done? I mean, if you really want to do your best, which we're going to talk about next week is the fourth agreement. The fourth agreement says do your best, which you're going to find that multitasking is not a part of doing your best. You're spreading yourself out. Just focus and get things done, and everything will get done, right? Everything will get done, and it will take your 100% attention, and you're going to do it the way you want to do it the first time. So, next thing, a belief. I should say a belief. I'm sorry, there's a typo. A belief is a thought that is taken to be true, whether it's true or not, and whether it's accurate. Sometimes, again, part of the third agreement is this really accurate? Is what I'm saying accurate? Is it true? Is there any other way to look at this situation than other than the way I'm looking at it? Am I looking at it through my eyes of experience or and the way I've been brought up? Or am I actually looking at it with fresh eyes, looking at it differently from my new perspective? Last one, our dream of hell is based on our pattern of making assumptions. How many people have had that 3 a.m. wake up and they experience where they go, oh my God, I'm in hell? Anybody? And at that moment you're making assumptions about, well, what happens if this person does that? Well, what happens if they do this? Well, why did they do that to me?
Well, why? Okay, well, if they did that to me, and I'm going to do this, and you start going in this mental game, it's the one that keeps you up, wakes you up, right? And also makes your stomach turn. And again, you have to ask yourself, what am I basing this thought on? You know, some people wake up in the middle of the night about their finances. Some people wake in the middle about their relationship, you know, about their health conditions. They wake up in a panic about it because of the assumptions they've made that they're not, that nothing else is going to change this, or that I am a certain way. We've made these assumptions and we haven't allowed ourselves to experience the idea of change around it. We base everything on past experiences. Or, my favorite, the advice of other people and their past experiences. So that's like getting on someone else's freeway and going around. It's not even your own journey, it's their journey. Everything has to be treated differently. When we're making assumptions, we're usually, some people, this is when they start gossiping. I don't know about you, but I've been really conscious about people gossiping. I went out to dinner the other night, and we were with some friends, and they started in on some gossiping. And I'm like, I'm really uncomfortable around that now. Now I'm like, you know what? I really don't want to talk about that stuff. And they're like, well, what's your opinion? I said, I don't have one, because it's not mine. If I can't say something in front of a person, I'm not going to say it at this table. That's your litmus test. The litmus test is, would you say it in front of them, not behind their back at a party, but would you say it in front of them, and could you say it and have integrity around it? Could you be impeccable with your word and not hurt somebody, but just say something gently and honestly? If you can't do that, you have to wonder, why am I engaging in this level of conversation? Next thing, sometimes we're afraid to ask for clarification. Who said they were asking more questions? David. David said, you know, what he found about making assumptions is, now I have to ask more questions because I'm not getting enough information the first time around. Sometimes people make assumptions because they're afraid of asking questions. They feel like if I ask a question, I'm going to insult the person that's giving me the information. You know what? I would say this. I would rather parrot back to somebody what you thought they just said, and then ask them, is this correct? In other words, when they say something to you and it doesn't sound right, say, you know what, this is what I think I just heard you say, and not be in a combative way. Say, this is what I just heard you say. Is this correct, or am I missing something? And they may find that, and I have found when people say that to me, it's because I'm assuming the other person is already on the same page that I'm at when I'm talking to them. And sometimes they're just not. We're on separate pages. So a lot of times I'll say, even with Trey, my partner, I'm like, I'll say something, he's like, whoa. I'm not tracking this. And that's what I've been saying lately. I've been using the phrase, I'm not tracking this. I need you to rewind and help me go through this again. I'm not tracking this. For whatever reason, I'm unclear. And I'm asking more questions. It allows me the opportunity. When I tell people, I don't blame them and what they're saying. I say, I'm not tracking. Not, I don't understand what you're saying. No, I'm not tracking. Can you see the difference? The first one is accusatory. The second one is my responsibility. So I'm taking responsibility for the conversation. Next thing, I don't perceive things the way they really are. I perceive the way I want them to be sometimes. You know how sometimes you look at people and you go, how can they not see this? It's because some people just don't want to see it. They don't want to see themselves. And sometimes we ignore things because we don't want to address them. We just don't want to deal with it. And so we ignore them, hoping that they'll go away. Have you ever done that? And have they ever gone away? No? Usually, they end up coming back in your experience with a vengeance. Meaning, not angrily, but they come back more and more again, and it's more powerful until you pay attention to it. That could be a health condition. It could be a relationship. It could be a financial condition. It could be in your career, your vocation, whatever it is. Until you deal with that stuff as it comes up, it will continue to repeat. I always say this. The universe always starts out by going like this to me, right? And then it's a little bit more direct, and it's a slap, right? And then the little 2x4 comes up sometimes, and it just whacks me in the back of the head, right? And if I don't get it there, I'm like, boom, right into the wall. I mean, it doesn't quit until I am good and beat up and ready to take charge of it. It requires me to actually pay attention enough to say, why can't I listen when the universe just does this? Right? Maybe I need to pay attention to this so I don't have to hit the wall. Sound familiar? In your relationships, pay attention to these so they don't become walls. Because once they become a wall and you're not paying attention to it, it becomes really hard because all these assumptions and all the things we've been talking about come into play, don't they? Next thing, we make assumptions that our partners know what we think. One of the biggest problems that we have is in any relationship, whether it's a work relationship or a loving relationship, intimate relationship, or friendship, is that I'm making an assumption that you already know what I'm thinking. You know why I make that assumption? Well, we've been together 29 years. What do you mean you don't know what I'm thinking? You should know what I'm thinking. I shouldn't have to tell you. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Just because they have seniority and longevity doesn't mean they have that insight to what's going on in your head. Does that make sense? You know, just because we've been together for a certain length of time, or I've worked with you for a certain length of time, or you've cared for me professionally in a certain way, doesn't mean I can assume I know exactly what you're thinking. So don't assume you know what other people are thinking. Use the parroting method of telling people what you think you're hearing, right? Am I understanding this? I just want to make sure I'm understanding this so I respond correctly, not react. Remember, this whole class is about learning how to respond, not react. So let me make sure I got this so that I'm able to respond from a place where I'm comfortable, right? It's not attacking them, it's allowing me to come from an authentic place. And then I think this is from the Languages of Love, or not Languages of Love. I forget the name of the book. Sorry, it's escaped me. But think about this when you're talking to people that you're working with or that you have a loving relationship with. How can I affect change in my relationship? First thing is I can use words of affirmation. Instead of condemning a person for not doing something, affirm what's working. I've been making a special practice about this. I've been making spiritual practices on these different things and testing them in my own way. Part of what I'm doing with even in my own relationship, as I talk to Trey, it's like, what do we do best? What do we do best? We went to a party the other night, and we had a great time. And I said, you and I, we do really well in social situations. We need to schedule more of those because we have a lot of fun when we're with our friends. So why don't we calendar that? You know, there's always going to be the laundry. There's always going to be the dishes. There's always going to be bill paying, right? But those things are always things we have to do. But what if we allowed each other to see the best, looking for the best in each other, and affirm it by taking actions around it? What do we do well together? And schedule more of those things. Does that make sense? It will make those other things that are less comfortable more tolerable because I know this is on the calendar, right? I'm going to get through this because I know on the other side of that is this other thing where we like each other, right? Where we really have a good time together. Next thing, affectionate touch. Sometimes we forget to touch the people we love. That's family members too. I remember for years I never hugged my father, and I don't know why, but we just never hugged. And then I remember just before he made his transition, a couple years before he made his transition, he made an extra effort to come up and give me a hug. And it shifted something. I'm like, why did we ever stop doing that? Why did I stop hugging my dad? Or why did I stop, putting my arm around someone special? I mean, we've become really sensitive in society about touching people, and I understand that. But also let's be aware of sometimes we don't even express what would be a natural expression for another person. And because people are so sensitive about it. What if we just started like, you know what? I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to have a contact that's not overtly sexual or overtly intimate, but just say, you know what? I really appreciate you. And get back to that because we need it, but we're not willing to give it. So if I need it, I have to be willing to give it first. I have to be willing to put myself out there first and be open and receptive to it coming back to me returned. Not from the same person maybe, but just in general. Does that make sense? If you want to experience love, you have to be loved first. If you want to experience joy, you have to actually give that first, and then whatever we give, we receive. Next thing, acts of service. One of the biggest acts of service anyone can ever do for me was recently discovered when I had to go get my car smogged. And Trey volunteered to go and get my car smogged. It was an act of service for me. It was brilliant. I didn't have to schedule it. He took the car. I was thrilled, because I looked at that little thing on the desk for months, going, your renewal is due, and I paid the renewal, but I didn't get the smog because I didn't read it, right? So then I get the smog thing that comes in. I'm like, oh my God, really? And then lovingly, he came in and he said, I'll take care of that. I'm like, okay, I'm yours, right? Just smog my car. That's all it takes. That's a low bar now, isn't it? You just smog my car and I'm yours. All right, anyway, acts of service, doing things just because you want to help someone else, or just do something out of the ordinary so that the person who's drawn assumptions about your behavior, you start changing things and saying, I'm willing to start shifting things around up here, and you don't have to tell them, but you just do it. You lead by example. Does that make sense? Quality time, we always talk about quality time, putting it on a schedule with your friends, your family, and your loved ones. Sometimes we're really busy. Sometimes we get too busy in things, and we forget what's really important. And so actually putting it on the calendar. I actually have time. Like when my sister was visiting, I told Elizabeth, I put it on my calendar. I'm like, this is time that I will be spending with my sister. Do not schedule anything in this time unless it's an emergency, because I have to do that, or everybody wants your time. Everybody wants a piece of you. You have to carve out that time for quality things in your life, but we have to carve it out. It doesn't happen organically. It happens with intention. Does that make sense? If I allow things to happen organically, sometimes I don't even have time to go to the bathroom, right? No, I have to schedule these quality things with my family and my time and my friends. Last thing, meaningful gifts. I'm not talking about you have to go buy diamond rings, right? I'm not talking about bracelets or anything like that. But you know what? Sometimes a bookmark, like the bookmark you gave me, is beautiful, right? It was a random thing. You brought it in. I'm like, oh my God, that's really pretty. And I use it. Little things like that, just something little out of the ordinary, takes people out of an assumed behavior that they think let's face it, we get into ruts. Whether you're a couple or whether you're friends or whether you're family, we get into ruts. And what's the difference between a rut and a grave? Depth. That's it. That's it, right? Depth. So we get into ruts. Before we allow things to die around us, we have to recognize through examined thought where we're making assumptions about our loved ones and our partners and our friends, and get out of these ruts. And these are just suggestions. I tell you what, I picked up a bouquet of flowers at Albertsons. I didn't have to go to a florist. I threw it on top of my oranges. I have no idea why I did that, right? But I went by and I saw those flowers. I thought, you know what? I think those would be really nice on our counter. As our daughter came home for the weekend, I thought, I run it, and my sister was home. I'm like, I'm going to get these. Random, had nothing to do with anything. It wasn't trying to suck up to anybody. It was just, you know what? Something different. And I enjoyed them. They're still on my counter even today, some of them. But, they're there. And it's like just a little something. It just takes a little something to change the energy around it. Changing the assumptions in your relationship is really important, right? Whether it's a loving relationship or a friendship, or whether it's a coworker relationship, no matter what, we are all in relationship with one another. Remember yesterday's talk, we're all one? It truly is everyone's in the same circus here. So if we're all in relationship with each other, then whatever I'm doing is helping lift everything, not just myself or the person I'm with. It helps raise the bar of humanity, period, by joining in and experiencing more joy and love. Does that make sense? Any questions? Good stuff? Yeah. Tonight's a short but really good chapter, right? The ladder of inference, the recommendations that we have here about how to add love to all of your different relationships that you're in, how to change the assumptions and the dynamics of things, how to actually shift things around, because the only thing that's going to change is if you shift it. It's not going to happen on its own. It's going to take you to actually lead by example in shifting things. Now, here's the problem. Let me tell you, I'm going to give you the warning shot. Some people will begin shifting, and other people will ask you, what are you up to? There has to be a motive behind this. Why are you doing this? Right? Because of their assumptions, sometimes we're called into question about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And sometimes I just have to tell people, you know what? Because I just want to. I don't want a thing from you. I don't need a thing from you. It's because this is what I just want to do. So can I do it? You know? I'm not asking for you to reciprocate. I'm not asking you to just do it. Just do it. Make sense? Finally, the last one is this. Random acts of kindness. Doing something for somebody, you have no idea what, where, how, but you're doing it and you disappear. You don't do it for recognition. You do it just because it starts the ball rolling. Because sometimes we can get really bitter about humanity and how people are treating one another, and you can shift the perception. If we can, you know how we always say, we're changing lives one heart at a time? If you can change just one heart for whatever reason, and I do this quite often at the grocery store. I'll leave the cashier an extra 20 and I'll say, you know what? Put this on their bill right behind me. Don't just wait till I'm gone. But then when they go to check out and they go to put the money in, say, you know what? The guy in front of you, just here. And I make sure I'm gone. Make sure I'm gone. Because it just reminds people that, you know what? Not everybody is a jerk out there. You know, I don't have to have, not everybody should be suspect or of a motive or intention. It's like, you know what? A random act of kindness really goes a long way. However you can achieve that. Because it starts, it starts a spiritual sequential falling, right? It ripples out. So if we can start it. Because you're going to change the energy around for someone else. And that can only help you, right? It's selfish in a way. When I help you, it helps me. When I do something for someone else, I feel really good about doing it. I feel better. I feel more accomplished. I feel more at peace. I feel like I've done something other than just take care of my own basic needs. Does that make sense? So all of that is part about making assumptions in relationships. All of it is connected. Can you see the connectivity to it? All right? All right, we're going to break into small groups. Yay, it's small group time. Woohoo! All right, so everybody send up a representative from your group, and I will give you directions once you're all seated. So, all right, let's do it. How many do you need? 4. There you go. Maybe 3. We got a lot of people missing tonight. All right, we may want to. If there's only 3 people in a group, we may pair you up with another small group because we want to make sure that people feel. Here, I gave you 4. If you need more, let me know. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Just wait, and I'll tell you where. All right. You're done. All right, so here we go. You guys know how to do this. Set up a timekeeper. Just go around and your prayer requests or your affirmation requests from last year or last week, just follow up on that. You okay? Follow up on your prayer request. Then support. Ask if you want them to support you this week. Ask what you want support on. You guys flip your page over, write their name down, what they're looking for. And then your assignment tonight is we have a project of a prayer on week 10. I know it seems a little far in advance, but if you've thought about your project, which is the prayer that you have to do, just a prayer, not like a poster board, a prayer, right? That's all you have to do. You have to stand up and read a prayer. Have you thought about that? The last thing is sharing. Share your thoughts about the third agreement. Don't make assumptions. Can you see the high degree of self-discipline mastery you would achieve if you sought to understand another position instead of making assumptions? So the share is there, and then the last time you go around the room, ending with what the word you're feeling at the moment, okay? So we're going to take, let's see, I got a group, the biggest group I think has 5. Yep, 5. So 6 minutes, 5 to 6:30. We'll resume at 8:05, all right? So that gives you guys 30 minutes, right? Cool. let you take this other one.